All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Good
Morning,
morning.
everybody.
How are you today?
Good, good.
Good.
So welcome to Home Care Frontlines, powered by Home Care Resource, where we review stories we and over solutions and lessons from the real world home care. Today we're sharing a story about a caregiver who stole more than $75,000 from a client over a 5-year period. What shocked everyone was that she was one of the agency's most beloved caregivers
Right. And she was also 75 years old.
and
Oh,
75 years old. So, what happened? Well, um, the client, so the caregiver was with the same client for over 5 years, and the client's daughter became involved in managing her dad's finances. And she noticed just a peculiar withdrawal from her dad's accounts and didn't think of it in the beginning, but then just saw it was consistent and then reported it to the agency and felt and wanted to report that they think that there was foul play. And so when the owner found out and started investigating, he was shocked because it truly was one of his favorite caregivers. It was a
oh,
woman, as Edwin said, in her 70s. She would come into the office on a regular basis and check in, and
Right. She all loved her. She was happy.
she was happy. She would check in. She would go to the annual employee picnic that he would host because he always hosted a great party. Um, but it happened.
Right.
wow.
And there really weren't any obvious warning signs until somebody else started, the family member started looking into the spending and realized that there were charges on Costco credit card and bank account monies that were routinely being withdrawn, and not large amounts, but over the years, 5 years, it added up to $75,000. So
Oh,
quite the
wow.
shock
Yeah,
to
I
the
mean,
agency.
yeah, that's like about 15,000 a year. I mean, she
Wow.
could have been taking away $1,000 a month.
That's a lot.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, that's a
that's
lot. So what were the warning signs, and how does an agency deal with this once they learn about it? Because a lot of times they don't learn about it until it's too late.
Yeah.
And what's their policies and procedures around this? Something that we see frequently, that people get into trouble and then they look for policies and procedures to try and avoid it in the future, which is what this agency did.
Oh,
Was then they looked at their policies and procedures and realized, we have nothing that addresses this, and we have no training. That's which is the other thing is what are we training our caregivers on? We rush them through that 5 hours of training and don't talk about stealing, client theft, property, client rights, those kind of trainings. And we're trusting that an online training program will give that information. And it should be something we talk about because it's part of our policies and procedures around that, along with the disciplinary process and the fact that caregivers should not be in using clients' credit cards or have access to their bank accounts. That should all be in policies and procedures.
so what
oh,
obligations did the agency have with this? Well, their main obligation is having set boundaries and rules, which are your policies and procedures. And they needed to convey that during the orientation, the onboarding process. The
oh,
state require home care services branch requires 5 hours of training for the caregiver. That doesn't limit what your additional training can include and are obligated to, where you go over your handbook. What does it mean to work in your agency? And in your program description, which was submitted with the application, it talks about no tipping, no accepting gifts, but that gets overlooked. And it's because it was a box that was checked to get license or to have a form, and yet it's not being used. So the obligation is agencies need to, leadership need to know what are the rules and obligations that they have in place in their agency, as well as, you know, that person, nobody visited that caregiver and that client's home over the course of the 5 years. Nobody did supervisory visits
Oh,
because that caregiver was happy and
Right.
and nobody complained and she never complained.
Right.
So why go over there and do a supervisory visit when oh, she's a great caregiver.
that's
If
true.
everything's going well because there are no complaints, that doesn't mean everything's going well.
That's true.
And this is a great example of a story that we wanted to lead with today, of a true example of an agency being caught off guard. They ended up paying back out of their funds, out of the agency funds, $75,000 to the family
Oh,
because
wow.
they were able to prove that there was this amount of funds withdrawn, used, and the police were already involved. So before it went to a lawsuit, this was what they all agreed upon to settle the case and return the funds, which cost the agency that. And then obviously, the caregiver lost their job.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was reported, you have to report elder abuse and using the SOC 341 form because we're all mandated reporters of elder abuse and neglect. So that kind of sums that up. But again, people don't realize that this is what happens in the front lines of home care.
All the time. And we hear these stories on a weekly basis of different things that happen. So,
So every month when we're hosting this, we will always share a story from the front line.
yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that will happening. Wow. Well,
Yes.
thank you for that
And
story.
yeah, the agency was in the same boat. They never thought this would happen. They never thought this would happen to them. And when it happened, they were in shock, and their first call was to us. What do we do?
Yeah, and I want to like the kind of give a like a character profile of this agency. They've been they're part of a franchise. They've been in business for well over 10 plus years, years prior to even licensing being in place. It's family owned. It got passed down from one generation to another. So there was just a lot of trust built in and that family and
Yeah.
culture environment. So I can understand why there was this big shock, but it was a wake up to understand that we can't always assume everyone is doing the right thing and the right job. We
That's
always are still obligated as an employer and as a business owner for our clients and for our safety of our caregivers to still do our due diligence. So this wasn't just some agency that was new in the business. They had history
Well,
in the community. So I love the question that Edwin asks at this every month when we started this during COVID is what is keeping you up at night? What is keeping you up at night and that you just don't know who to ask and where to get the answers and maybe some direction? This is that time for you to ask those questions, and we're here to supply that reassurance for you.
Thank you so much.
thank you for
Yeah,
that.
Well, you know what? I think as we get more people online, it's best if everybody mutes themselves. And then if you have a question, two things. One is you can put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand with the little hand raise hand icon on the bottom of the screen, and we'll just call your name out, and then you can unmute yourself, and then we can listen to you. We can hear your question.
All right. That's done.
So go, you can chat or you can raise your hand. We can't see you. No one has their camera on, which is fine, but you can still raise your hand, the little hand icon on the bottom of the screen. Maybe we can we do it once and show people how it. See, there we go. We have our hand raised.
so Who would like to ask the first question or make the first comment about what's keeping you up at night? Why you felt like you needed to be part of this call today?
Well,
Sorry, the chat is
well,
not working. The chat is
oh,
disabled.
thank you very much. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself, and then you can ask your question live. And as we're on, well, we'll open up the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is, I keep getting different responses from CTSS in regards to the X-ray.
Yes.
It depends really who I contact, because I just need to know more a clear definition. Like if it is somebody that has been already connected to an agency and I see it in the system, what are the requirements? Do I have to have them do another X-ray? That doesn't make sense at all.
That's a great question. And it always needs a moment to get clarified and to be readdressed every month. So you're in good company in that it is confusing in what they're stating.
And we've been working with licensing since the very beginning, and have a very clear understanding of what the regulations actually say and what is required by those regulations and what is approved by the Home Care Services branch. And what you're learning is that, which Kara and I have known for a very long time, is that each analyst at the Home Care Services branch has an opinion, and those opinions may not be correct. So let's give you some guidance today on the proper process for accepting or requiring a caregiver to get a chest X-ray examination.
And this is based on the Health and Safety Code 1796.45. So these are that is the actual regulation. So we'll start from the beginning, and you'll see how it weaves into with the X-ray. So it is by law that all caregivers and people that are touching and interfacing with clients, the caregivers specifically, must have a TB exam on file. And a TB exam must be CDSS FDA approved exam. And it must be within 90 days from the date of hire. So it's less than 90 days from the date of hire, or within 7 days from the date of hire. We find, and we highly recommend, best practice is to do it before they're hired. Okay. So they have their TB test, and the TB test can be the skin test, where they get their skin pricked, and then within 48 to 72 hours, they go back and they get that skin test read. And the red date, the date that they come back, that is the date that they have the findings, and that's where it's positive or negative. It could also be a blood test. Blood test is just the one time they draw blood and they don't have to come back. When the test is negative, you get a form from the clinic stating that they took their name, identifying if that's that person when they got the TB test, and the date that it was read. And they must get a TB test at a minimum every 2 years. So that's a TB exam that's negative. It's required every 2 years. Now, if it's positive, it must be followed up with a chest X-ray, and the chest X-ray must indicate that there are no signs of active tuberculosis. So on the chest X-ray, it must show, there must be some wording that says history of positive TB, that the exam shows that they're cleared and no signs of active tuberculosis. That must be on the reading of the chest X-ray. Once you have that positive test followed by the chest X-ray, and they're affiliated to your agency, they no longer need to do that TB test and chest x-ray ever again. Now, as it was brought up, what about transferring over from one agency to another? Health and Safety Code allows us, once we have proof that the caregiver is working with another agency, and we find that proof when we go to the home care, HCA state registry, and we look up their per ID, we put their per ID number and their name, and we see that they're affiliated with other home care organizations. That is our proof. So we print that out. And the state says we can accept a TB test that's greater than 90 days, but has to be less than 2 years, because the state said earlier that a TB test must be done every 2 years. So if that TB test or chest x-ray is less than 2 years, you can accept that. But if it's greater than 2 years, they must do it all over again. That chest x-ray exemption of them never having to do that again, that's only if they're affiliated with that agency. But if it's been over 2 years since they went from one agency to another, they have to do that whole 2-step process all over again. Get the TB test, show that it's positive, and then they follow up with a chest x-ray. It's been our experience, Edwin, where many caregivers say, oh, I always test positive, so I need to go directly to the chest x-ray. Oddly enough, many of them don't always test positive right away.
And the regulations do state that a person must have proof that they tested positive and then have a chest x-ray. So that's why them saying, well, I always test positive doesn't work. Our regulations in home care, and we agree, they don't make a lot of sense, but our regulations in home care state that they must be tested, and if found positive, that be followed up by a chest x-ray. So that would be for people who you have no proof that they are on the registry and affiliated with another home care organization. And just to make this very clear, your proof is a printed copy of the home care aid registry showing that they're cleared and registered and affiliated to other agencies, but not affiliated to your agency. If your agency is on there that they're affiliated with, now you have no proof that they were affiliated to someone else first. So it's very important that you do not affiliate caregivers until their date of hire, till their date of orientation, which should be the same date as their hire date. So is that helpful?
Yeah, was that helpful?
Yeah, that is very helpful because yeah, that's at least that is clear. I mean, it's unfortunate that they have to do this every 2 years, even though they have x-ray proof, but
So if they work for you and they have proof that they have a valid x-ray and they're affiliated to you and that x-ray was valid when they came to you, then they don't have to go and do any more TB testing for the home care services branch proof.
With your agency.
yeah,
But let's say they work with your agency and 3 years later, they now want to apply for another agency. They have to do it all over again because it's that 2-year rule of transferability.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I ask you one more question?
Absolutely.
My next question is in regards to the LiveScan. So I have a lot of CNAs that are doing their LiveScan through their CNA program. And then in the past, I used to be able to call CDSS and say, well, you know, they're going to start working with me. Can you kind of connect their LiveScan approval to the record of the home care aid registration? And all of a sudden, all of a sudden now they're saying, oh, no, we cannot see it. Is there anything else I can do? Or is there anything that I can somehow get from their application that I can use in order for that LiveScan to be approved?
Great question. And the short answer is no. And they should not have been allowing you to transfer CDPH, California Department of Public Health, who licenses CNAs or registered CNAs. They should never have allowed that to transfer over. The LiveScan background checks are specific to the California Department of Social Services. If someone happens to be a CNA working in an assisted living community, they will have done Department of Social Service fingerprinting there. There are two different sets of fingerprints. They're coded differently on the LiveScan form. And so the Department of Social Services does not receive updates to backgrounds from the Department of Health. So them being CNAs is just coincidental because a CNA cannot work in home care. Only registered home care aides can work in home care. So they have to register as a home care aide. They have to LiveScan fingerprint as a home care aide. If they're a CNA, a nurse, an LVN, a physical therapist, a doctor, their background check doesn't count for the Department of Social Services, Home Care Services branch. Everyone needs to be fingerprinted under the Department of Social Services using LiveScan form LIC 9163. And otherwise, it doesn't count.
Yeah, so as Edwin stated, a lot of when people are applying and they say I'm a CNA, but they may also be working in a residential care facility, an assisted living community. And those possible candidates that you had in the past may have also worked at an assisted living community. And that could be the reason why they assisted in transferring, because we can transfer fingerprints from an assisted living community to home care services organization in the past, and we can still do it now, but that fingerprint has to be pretty fresh within the last couple of years. And a lot of CNAs or caregivers that work in assisted living say, oh yeah, I'm a caregiver, but we can never find them in the registry because they may have the title of a caregiver in assisted living, but they don't follow and they're not obligated to register themselves as a home care aide on the home care aide registry because that's home care. So there's lots of similar languages out there that we really need to make sure we need to distinguish that when we're interviewing people. And as Edwin said, that fingerprinting from Department of Health does not transfer Department of Social Services because your background check system is through the Guardian and the Care Provider Management Branch.
Yeah.
That's all. So that's different. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense to be honest, but yeah, I get that's the law.
Yeah, I mean, a background should be a background, but in California, it's not. And the other area where this gets confusing is caregivers that come from working as IHSS in home supportive services.
Yeah,
Caregivers
exactly.
also have a background, but they have a different background, a different code. It goes to a different department. And so they too must be re-fingerprinted to work in a home care organization
They don't need to be on the state registry.
as an
As a
IHSS worker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But home care aides have to be, if they're a CNA, they have to fingerprint
Mm-hmm.
for the Department of Social Services, and they must register as a home care aide and pay the $35 registration fee. A home care aide is not the same thing as a CNA. The
Yeah.
fact that you have lots of CNAs is just you're looking for CNAs to come to work for you, but they're outside their scope of practice as a CNA working as a home care aide. Home care aide is its own scope of practice. That's how I help sort it through in my head, because I came into home care from home health and hospice where I had a LiveScan fingerprint. I had background check done. When I came into home care, I had to redo it, pay again for fingerprints. It all seemed like it went to the same place. But because there's a code on the LiveScan form, that's where the follow-up information of background check, ongoing background checks goes to like a specific mailbox, and it only includes the home care services branch and the Department of Social Services.
Gotcha. Okay.
So sorry that isn't the answer that you were hoping for there.
It was a very thorough answer, though.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. The clarification. Yeah.
Any question worth asking is worth over answering, I say.
Maritas, you have a question? You raised your hand.
Yes, just a follow-up question about the TB test. The number one question I have is that if the HCA has a negative PPD skin testing and quantiferon lab test, do they need a MD note that goes with it that need to be on the file?
You need proof of tuberculosis examination in their file. If it's a skin test or a quantiferon blood test, you need proof of that in the file, which is in the employee health file, to be immediately available for inspection or by an enforcement analyst. So yes, you need proof that they have been TB tested.
But is that what was the question, that you needed a signature from the
Yeah,
doctor?
yeah, just like if the MD gave a note, if the client or if the HCA has a clearance for the chest X-ray, like say good or cleared to work because it's good to go. But
Yeah.
PPD test, if it's negative or quantiferon, do they need the same note that goes with the file?
Yes, yes. You need that from the clinic wherever they went. And again, the clinic's name is on there, that caregiver's name is on it, the date of the exam, the type of exam, and what the result of that exam, and that it was checked by a approved medical professional. So that is what is accepted as a TB exam. And a TB exam could come in so many different forms. A person could be on Kaiser and they have access to their Kaiser medical documents online, and then there's the results there. They can send that to you. Or they go into a community clinic, and the community clinic actually has all of the typed out, and there's somebody's actual signature. As long as all of those data points are on that form, that is accepted.
Which is another story that we share, is we've seen people send us copies of TB examination report, which do not include the patient's name.
Yeah.
And does not include the date that the test was administered and the date it was read in the event of a PPD skin test. So all the information needs to be clearly point to the caregiver that the TB exam applies to, and that needs to be hard copy in the file, immediately available for viewing by an enforcement analyst upon request. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Makes sense?
Okay.
And one other follow-up on TB. In California, we have seen where caregivers might show a TB exam out of country. You cannot accept a TB exam from out of the country. From Mexico and the Philippines tend to be the two most popular ones. We cannot accept that. They must get something from the United States.
Yeah, it must be CDC, Center for Disease Control, and FDA, Food and Drug Administration approved testing facility. And the medical professionals that can sign a TB would be an LVN, a licensed vocational nurse, or a licensed practical nurse in other states, a registered nurse, or a physician assistant. Their names and credentials must be easily identified on the proof documentation.
Good questions, guys.
Yeah, these are great questions.
Yeah, I love talking about like regulations.
Yeah.
And these are the very things that get you into inspection trouble, and they come up all the time. And TB is probably the number 2 deficiency found during an inspection.
Yeah.
it's one of the most violent. It's a Class A offense in that it's considered elder abuse if you send caregivers to the home of a client without them being properly TB tested. It is considered elder abuse. And so it's a very finable during an inspection. If they find that you're sending a caregiver that is not properly TB tested, they will tell you to immediately remove that caregiver from the client, not reschedule them until you provide the analyst proof that the TB is current. So it's a serious offense.
I see. So the other questions I have, thank you for that, Edwin. The other questions I have is with the background check follow-up question. So it says earlier that the background check for HCA is specific for the HCA for the guardian. So my question is, how many times throughout the employment does the HCA need to have that background check specific?
Great question. And the answer is a positive one. They only need it one time. They do not need to renew that unless they leave employment and stop working as a home care aide for probably 2 years or more. And then they will need to re-fingerprint. But as long as they're employed as a home care aide, keep that current, they do. It doesn't matter if they're working for you or if you find them and they come from another agency, they don't need to redo that background check.
Here's a great example. I started in assisted living as an executive director in 2003. Those original fingerprints are still within the system. I've never had to re-fingerprint myself. And I'm also on the HCA state registry because I want to have that experience of being on the state registry. When I registered myself back in 2015, 2016, I never had to re-fingerprint because I was just recently left a facility a couple of years prior to that. So yeah, so long as they are still active within the CDSS community care license facility, their fingerprints should be, that's just one time. However, anytime that like that person has some sort of criminal activity outside of work that warrants notification that leads to a misdemeanor or felony, you will be notified immediately in a formal letter, and that'll tell you to take that person, must immediately be off your roster. But they don't tell you why. They just said a current background check has been submitted and you must remove this person from your scheduling right away.
So we do see part of the problem with the do they need to re-fingerprint comes when they do need to re-register and pay the $35 home care aid registration fee. At that time, they do not need to re-fingerprint. They just need to renew their registration as a home care aide. Their background is still good, but their registration expires every 2 years. So every 2 years, they pay $35. You want to make sure that the registration doesn't expire while they're working for you, because if it expires, then they come off of your roster and you cannot work them because their license is considered forfeited.
That also leads to with that, I mean, just we can go and lead into story, but what that leads into is a caregiver has a renewal date. So the original registration date, let's say, is June 2nd of 2026. They must renew by June 2nd of 2028. So it's good for 2 years. And it's called renewal. If I fail to renew on June 2nd of 2028, and it's now June 3rd of 2028, I must now do an initial application once again because my renewal date has passed. So it changes from renewal to like, oh, I have to do initial. The good news is my per ID number will still remain the same and my fingerprints are still valid. I won't need to re-fingerprint for if I paused for a minimum of 2 years or more, it might ask me to do my fingerprints. For sure, if it's 5 years or more, they'll be asked to be fingerprinted. And another key indicator is once they register, it'll tell them if they need to be fingerprinted at the end.
Yeah.
I see. All right, that's great. Thank you for that clarification.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to take a moment and, just if no one has ever been to any of our courses, we host live courses here in our training center in San Diego. We're all based in San Diego. And we like to keep very small, intimate classes, no more than 10 to 12 people at most. And we have 2-day courses and we have our 5-day owner boot camp. So our next course is coming up is next week, and it's a sales accelerator course where we train senior professionals on the process and the benefits of relationship sales and marketing and consultative selling. So it's more of where you are an integral part of your network of referral sources. It's very successful. Then our owner boot camp is in July and it's 5 days. Who wouldn't want to be in San Diego for 5 days? And that's where we go over all the basics of how to run and operate a home care organization. We review operating systems, different types of software. We help you build your business strategy during that time. And there's lots of role playing on recruiting of caregivers, how to retain caregivers, sales, and then also the dynamics of doing a proper home assessment and putting a plan of care and closing the sale with the service agreement. And the nice thing is everyone who comes to that boot camp receives $5,000 worth of digital operating materials from us, includes all of the home care aid training requirements from the state. We give that all to you, as well as important documents to run your organization. And then later on in the summer, we have our compliance workshop that's in August, and then our administrator course in September. So you're welcome to come to our website and visit the tab that says events. And that's where you all registered for this event. But we always have ongoing events. We have a beautiful noontime nugget coming up
Yes, we do.
on the topic of knowing the difference between agencies that struggle and agencies that scale. That sounds like a good sales and marketing one to me.
Yes, it is. It's to help people with their sales and marketing to figure out how to grow and what keeps people stuck in their cycle of non-growth.
Yeah.
And how do we grow? And a lot of it is around paying attention to our processes, paying attention to what it is that we're doing that allows growth to happen versus just every day struggling over the same little things that should have been resolved a long time ago. Like you would think by now the TB testing would be very, very understood and simple, but even the state analysts don't understand the regulations. Thank heavens you and I have 50 years between us
Yeah.
of experience working regulations in the healthcare industry, in home health and hospice and in assisted living and home care, hospitals. All of this stuff really makes a difference that I think sometimes I even forget that people that are kind of new to this have no clue how this foreign language works. It's like truly living in another country with a different language, working with licensing.
So did any other questions come up during that little segue about our courses?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. So what I'm concerned is whenever somebody just abandons the job, somehow they're just stop responding. I usually send a notice of separation, stating that they have resigned because that is job abandonment. They resigned in a way. But how, like if I have somebody that said, maybe what I'm thinking is, somebody in the future is going to try to collect unemployment or something like that. How do I just make sure that I have proof that they have abandoned the job, or what is the requirements for abandon, you know?
Great question and a great challenge. And this is something that really you do want to look to your policies and procedures over how you handle this, because this is something that should be instructed to caregivers during their first day of orientation.
Mhm.
If you abandon your job, meaning you no call, no show, we consider that to be voluntary resignation. And you make it clear right up front, because that's the documentation you're going to want to have when they turn around and try and get unemployment from you. Is you'll be able to show the labor law judge, we went over this in orientation and they signed their orientation that they went through this. They have a certificate of orientation where we covered this. It's in our employee handbook that they signed, that they received and acknowledged a copy of and had a chance to ask questions. And that then we have documented all the instances in which we offered them employment and there was no response. You do want a ledger of that. And that's why using your software is your scheduling software, electronic visit verification, whatever we call it, software is important to document. We made 5, 10, 20 attempts to put this person to work and there was no response. So after, based on our policy, after 30 days of no response, we consider this a voluntary termination. And that's how you justify this when you're defending it in a court, a labor law court. Now, the caregiver is probably going to win because it's California.
Oh,
But
really?
you've made your defense. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Most often it's an easy claim and the state doesn't question it.
So an interesting tactic, just real quick on this, an interesting tactic is when you terminate them, you want to make sure you disaffiliate them in on the home care aid registry.
No, guardian.
Well, in Guardian, yes. And then you go to the home care aid registry and you see if they're still affiliated to other agencies. That in and of itself is proof that they are working elsewhere that you can show to a judge. That's another avenue people don't often think of, is using that as evidence that they are affiliated to other agencies after they stopped responding to you. So that is just a sneaky little tactic that you can use to help your position a little better.
You reminded me of something.
Ah,
So yesterday in the news, I heard that individuals that are receiving scans, specifically assistance with food and monies to help them during the month, the 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 state is now putting more pressure that in order for them to qualify for the scan and for the food program, they must show that they're actively working at least 20 hours a week. So I thought, wow, that could be a really good recruiting for caregivers out there, for people who are, you know,
scan recipients.
scan recipients that are looking for the flexibility of their life, and they meet the state requirement of the 20 hours, because I'm sure they have very busy, full lives of what's going on. And as agencies, we have schedules 24 hours a day. We need coverage. That might be a nice win-win. And it's the pressure is on them that they must show actively working 20 hours. So I don't know. That might be an avenue there. I meant
There's
to
an
talk about that.
opportunity with that. Yeah, for
Absolutely.
recruiting caregivers that would do short shifts. That's what I see with that.
Short shifts and covering two overnight shifts, whatever. Again, that's flexible for them and for you.
Yeah. And I believe we'll see more like this as the federal government gets more involved in cutting Medicaid benefits, which again is part of Medicaid
Yeah, I think that,
or Medi-Cal in California. And
yeah.
yeah. Other comments or other parts of your question?
No, that I think that was yeah, that's one that I just, I keep running into just people just deciding to move on. And I'm always wondering, oh, at some point I'm gonna get it. I have
You know, and that,
Mhm.
So
and go ahead.
the other thing would be not to terminate them, but to leave them on, and then you can say, well, they're still employed with us. They've just not accepted any work.
Yeah, that's what
You're
I was gonna ask you. That was also a second part of it. But so I do have something happens and maybe I don't have enough hours if somebody decides to be put in, if a family decides to put a client in a facility and have a caregiver that is wanting to work and then they start working with somebody else. Is it a good idea for me to keep them in the roster, or does that make me, let's say, more accessible to somebody inspecting me and then somehow seeing, I don't know. I'm
Yes.
just
No, you're right in that. So as long they're a liability as long as they're on your roster. So and the liability in that case is your file. As long as your file is up to date and compliant
yeah,
with their
yeah,
annual training and TB and registry, you're
yeah,
fine. And if you have good, again, software, we mentioned it already a couple of times, if you're using software or whatever system you're using, those would be anniversary dates that I would have in the system to alarm me at least, 30 to 60 days in advance when they're due, so that okay, I've had Kira on the roster. She hasn't worked for the last 3 months. And her anniversary date of getting the annual training is due in 30 days. Okay, do we want to keep her? Do we want to get back with her?
yeah, right. And also another question I have is in regards to if somebody kind of discloses as I'm hiring them that yeah, they had maybe they pulled their back from their previous position because the agency was making them, lift somebody who was heavy and things like that. How do I cover myself? Like, is there any way I can cover myself if like if somehow I hire them and something happens where it's showing the previous company that was originally the issue versus mine? Like, is there any way that I can?
Yeah. Now, I have to say right off, we're not attorneys. So you can use what we say, but don't quote us. How's that?
Okay.
Um, because you can't discriminate against applicants uh, for health reasons like that. But your cautionary stance should be if that person um, discloses to you that they have had a prior injury, now that opens the door for a little more questioning for you to kind of go down that road a little bit.
Yeah,
Um, but definitely, I would not recommend putting them on anybody that required any hands-on care.
exactly.
Uh, they would be a sitter or a companion service only. And if you don't have those kinds of cases, then you don't have work for them. So they may go away on their own, just naturally because you don't have work for them. But I definitely would make certain that they are never put on a hands-on case, that it's all sitter or companion care only.
Got
I
it.
I would also like to add about since they disclose that, do they have medical clearance to continue to be do they have any job restrictions with their current agency? Because you want to follow that to protect them, and I would want to know that.
And that's a great topic for another entry is asking about are you currently on restricted job duty with another employer? Even though we can't ask that question, but if
She
they open
disclosed
the
it.
door,
Yeah.
then you can certainly say, are you on restricted duty? And do you have a clearance? If not, if you have a clearance, you could, let us see that you've been returned to work, able to perform at 100%. But then I would have that as a copy that if they,
And again, going down the rabbit hole of information, as an agency, once you decide to become a licensee, you become a risk manager. And the state says, okay, they need a TB test, but there's nothing to say that you couldn't have it in your policies and procedures. That you also have them do um, a um, a physical exam. That they are able to perform the job duties, the physical duties of a caregiver. That means an additional investment on the agency's part because you pay for that. And you would have a designated clinic or physician. I would work with somebody like that and have them have the job description and the job duties so they can ask the proper questions. And all you're asking for, are they clear for these job duties? You're not asking for, and it's not your right to find out if they have, some sort of medical condition that they want to keep private. Um, but you just want to make sure that they're safe to work in the job. And then they'll tell you, yes, they're released to go and perform these duties. And that's all you need. But that's an investment, and you would have to do that with everybody. You could not discriminate. And so
Yeah.
that's why in this one, because she opened the door, you can ask and then you can get that form. It wouldn't be discriminatory. Only if she came in a walker and then you would say, hey, I need a doctor's report. Then that's discriminatory.
I
And we've
see.
had caregivers show up in an interview with the walker, by the way.
This is the part of being a home care agency owner where you do have to wear tap shoes and know how to carefully dance the floor
Yeah.
around this, because anything that looks like discrimination or, um, wrongful termination can get you in bigger trouble with labor lawsuits.
And if she wasn't a great candidate, then it's okay that you move on. If she wasn't a great, he or she weren't a great candidate, they didn't meet all the criteria of what you are looking for in a caregiver, that's fine. That's not discrimination. It's just meeting the skill set and the requirements of your agency.
Yeah, just because you're interviewing somebody doesn't mean you have to hire them.
Yeah.
You can say no.
Yeah.
Too. If you in your interview sense things that don't fit with the culture of your organization.
I also wanted to, and before we end, I know we have just a couple more minutes. We might have one question there. If anyone has never had a consultation with Edwin and myself, we invite you to email us and directly, and we can set up a free 30-minute consultation. We always like to offer that to any first timers that's been exposed to us because we really take our title as trusted advisors to heart. And there's not many free things out there for us in this field, but we want to be that beacon of light for you all and offer that free consultation. So if you want to take advantage of that, please email us directly. Either at, the one email address that'll get to the both of us is called support@chcresource.com. That's support@chcresource.com. And one of us will connect with you to schedule a free consultation. Okay. So, one of us has an appointment for an inspection, a virtual inspection. Do you have a question about the virtual inspection, or are you about to step into it? So what we are seeing, okay, let's see. Oh, no question. Okay.
Yeah. What they're going to look for in a virtual inspection is they're going to make sure that your insurance coverages are up to date. So you want your proof of insurances current, up to date. That's general professional liability, workers' compensation, and your dishonesty bond. So they will ask for that. And then they're going to look at caregiver files first and foremost. In those caregiver files, they're going to want to look and see that Form SOC 341A The abuse acknowledgement form is in every file and signed. They want paper copies. They don't want electronic copies. So those must be in paper copy. Then they'll look for the caregiver training. Do they have their 5 hours of entry-level training completed, documented on Form HCS 500 or another like type form showing uh, the record of training, and then certificates of completion for each of those training modules that they have completed for 5 hours of entry level. And if they've been with you for a year or longer, they need 5 hours of annual training. And then they will also look for the TB documentation, and those all must be paper copies immediately available. If you're using a system that keeps it all electronic, go in, print that out, and make paper copy files for the analyst to look at. Because you have an inspection that is virtual, they're going to ask you to scan and email documents to them.
And we're seeing uh, more of that. So they're doing a mix of on-site and as well as virtual inspections.
Yeah, so we're seeing this more frequently of people doing online orientation. Our opinion is those first 2 hours of training need to be in person live in your office. They cannot be done online. Going over their role as a caregiver and the terms of employment with your agency is not an online process. So at least for those first 2 hours of the 5 hours of orientation, they should be in your office and signing hard copy forms of the papers. If you do not have hard copy forms, SLC 341A, and training certificates, you need to create those and get those signed by the caregivers for your inspection. There's really no way around that.
So I want to make a clarification as well. So orientation is one of those words that's thrown around, and we really want to clarify orientation. So when Edwin and I talk about orientation, we're speaking regulation speak and HCSB speak. In the regs, the 5 hours of entry level required training, 2 hours is called orientation. That's the roles of caregiver and terms of employment, as Edwin stated. A lot of people in general call orientation is that first day of training, that everything is called orientation. So we want to make sure that it's very clearly stated that we do believe in live the 2 hour orientation piece that is required. But in general, all of those classes are best to do live. We find that to be the best because you get to know the caregiver, they know about the culture of the organization. Yes, the convenience of online and all that, but really we're shortchanging the experience of the caregivers of knowing the agency, the culture, and what we expect our caregivers to how to be of service to our clients when we don't have that live interaction.
Yeah. So even if you do online orientation, there needs to be hard copy documents signed by the caregiver, and they cannot be DocuSigned.
Yeah.
They must be signed in ink. DocuSign went out after COVID was over. It was allowed if you requested it during COVID, but it's no longer allowed. So somebody is going to be running around to all the caregivers, getting them to sign Form SOC 341A. So you have those signed. You put the date on there, which is the first date of their date of hire. Don't sign it the date that you had them sign it. If they're not currently signed, have it signed that you put the date where you need that date to be their first date of hire. The date of hire becomes really important with compliance and with risk management. All stuff we go over in our compliance, 2-day compliance training. Strongly recommend any of you on here that have not been through that, you schedule and come and go through that training. It is well worth the money, the time, and the peace of mind that you get by knowing how to be compliant in home care.
All right, I think we've reached our time. Please sign up for next month. We always have the next month's up the following day. And again, we appreciate everyone being here and take advantage of that free consulting. And we're going to stop. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.